Hello and welcome to Fiber Trek. My name is Sarah. Welcome. You are most welcome to my studio space here in southern Maine. I am looking forward to sharing with you some discoveries I've made in stitching, as well as my journaling practice and fountain pens. I am going to take you on a Ruby romp and see what the snowy winter is like as it's finally settled in. If you are a patron of this podcast, a deep, heartfelt thank you for your financial contribution. I am so appreciative of all the insight and positive comments that come to encourage me here. I'm so glad that you're with me. Let's get started. I feel like I'm probably late to the party with the fountain pen phenomenon, and it is no surprise, I'm sure, to many of you that I have progressed to this particular practice. How could you not? The inks are so inviting, and there is such a community around the different types of pens and the handwriting and script that you can achieve with them. With that being said, I really wanted to improve my handwriting, and so I picked up this cursive writing practice that I am also doing with my nephew and niece. I got the Unicorns and Mermaid book for my niece, but Cameron and I are using this Hobbit practice book. It's taking you through the cursive alphabet, and we are currently on B. And we are both using our fountain pens. And it's been so fun to kind of reinvigorate handwriting. I'm sure many of you remember cursive. I had to do everything in cursive growing up for school. And so it's been fun to kind of examine my penmanship in a new way. This book includes the entire alphabet and then different work around words, quotes, and longer quotes for practice. I am thoroughly enjoying this throwback to junior high coupled with Tolkien. If you're curious, the pen that I am using is a Pilot Metropolitan in the gold finish, and I have it in the fine point and the medium. I guess they're not called points. The fine nib and the medium nib. I will keep you posted on Cameron's and my progress. In the meantime, let's see if I can achieve the alphabet.
You want to leave this place where we grew up, this old town, just put it all behind. Remember you and I would always find somewhere to hide when we were kids, so we could see and hear the water run. The river's gonna cry when you're gone. You miss the ones you know. I'll be here, hanging on, waiting for your call. Seems like time as a wave passing by, leave a mark in our minds to turn to memories. The river's gonna cry when you're gone, 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 gone. The river's gonna cry when you're gone, 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 gone. River's gonna cry when you're gone, 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 gone. River's gonna cry when you're. River's gonna cry when you're. River's gonna cry when you're gone.
was thrilled to learn that AlabamaChanin, or Natalie Chanin, who is the owner and creative inspiration behind AlabamaChanin and the School of Making, had published a new book. And this is a compilation of not only stories and her biography in a way, but also of technique and creativity using her personal design style. I've made a couple different garments inspired by her work and her instruction and technique, and I am thoroughly enjoying the visual delight that is this book. If you are looking for technique and instruction, I would recommend some of her other books, which actually come with patterns and examples. But this is more fluid and storytelling, and that is interwoven with different techniques. It's not a first book if you are looking, like I said, for a way in which to engage with her specific design style. This really got me thinking about the difference between invitation and instruction. I like to operate under the concept of invitation, inviting you to explore and be challenged by different techniques, but certainly not to be a person that instructs in them. It also got me thinking a lot about getting out my project. I am working on the AlabamaChanin duster, and I am doing this in a jersey knit, which I have spray painted myself. I am using a back stitch with the embroidery floss, which is a DMC. And this is a sleeve. I have one sleeve finished. It has multiple parts. I am slightly intimidated by the construction, but I am completely enamored with the stitching. Hello and welcome to the fiber portion of the episode. I'm looking forward to sharing with you what I've been up to, which has gone a bit rogue from what I anticipated January looking like. If you are a patron of this podcast, a deep, heartfelt thank you for the financial contribution you make to this project. As I have said in the intro, and I will reiterate here, it is a massive encouragement for me to enrich my skills and enrich this content and find new and creative ways to work with lots of different mediums. I have some trips planned coming forth in the new year in the summer, and I'm really hoping, as I had mentioned in a previous episode, that I can gather up my courage and my equipment and go abroad and bring you with me. So look for those coming this year and hopefully some new skills. Patrons of this podcast do receive a bonus episode, and I am putting together that as we speak, and look forward to that at the end of the month. Last time we were together, we were talking about a project for my nephew that I was going to make with my hand-spun yarn. And you had started to see a swatch of that. This is my hand-spun Icelandic from my own Icelandic. Per his request, he wanted a sweater from our own sheep wool. So I have spun this up. As I began to knit it, and I was, as I mentioned, going a bit rogue with patterning, I began to realize that the needle size I needed to use to create some comfort in knitting and an appropriate gauge was really going to not match his frame. He is a 9-year-old, slender, lean person, and this was looking massive, and so I really wanted to scale it down. So I also was very motivated to get him an Icelandic sweater that he could wear this year, and seeing as that You may notice I'm in a different area for this podcast. The weather has kept me south at my parents'. I commute between my northern home and my southern work, where I stay with my parents and visit with my family every week. I haven't been able to get home. And thinking about that and knowing my spinning record, I realized that I just needed to cast on. So I brought with me some Plotolopi from my stash, and I really abandoned all of my plans, as I had mentioned in my previous episode. So I'm not using handspun, I'm not knitting from Best of Lopi, and I'm not using, I am using the Drema for some counseling. But I decided that, as I mentioned, potentially, I'm re-recording this, that I just felt like the scale of the whole sweater for him wasn't going to match his frame. Plotolopi, and I looked into my favorites for children's sweaters, and I picked out the Dog Star by Tin Can Knits, which is what I wanted to knit him prior and to this whole episode. I felt like the motif was an appropriate, proportionately appropriate, and I could get the correct gauge, and it would be a lightweight sweater. It would, again, fit his frame and be an opportunity to be exposed to some Icelandic yarn before I hand spun a bunch of it for him, which I'm still planning to do. So for this sweater, I re-engineered it. I'm knitting it top down versus bottom up. I'm knitting the 8 to 10-year-old, and I thought that my gauge using this Plotolopi would actually be tighter than recommended, but I think it's coming out either spot on or just a bit bigger. I'm knitting this on a US 6, and let's see, what can I tell you? Let's start with the actual construction of the sweater. So knitting it top down, you can see that he is, as I mentioned, a slight frame, and this is a very wide neckline, which I have done in seed stitch. I did not do it in the ribbing, and in some ways I felt like that was probably beneficial, because it's not going to be close up around some of the more sensitive areas or exposed areas of his neck when he's wearing it. And so it's a very wide neck, and I opted to not do any short row shaping prior to the beginning of the main part of the yoke. So in my research that I had done on that, there was some discussion about whether you should do it there or below the actual yoke where it connects to the sleeves. And so I opted to forego this shaping up by the neck because I did not want to create extra fabric or a hump, considering this was already quite wide. But I am adding short row shaping here where the sleeves, the back, and the sleeves are before I separate for them. And I am using the patterning from Drema by Jen Steingast to kind of guide me and cue me on maybe how to approach that. So top down, short row shaping has been changed, 8 to 10, US 6 Plotolopi. Now, this is my first time knitting with Plotolopi, and I wasn't really quite sure how it was going to go after knitting this shawl with Mancholopi. So Mancholopi comes off of the plate with 2 pieces of roving, and Plotolopi comes off the plate with 1. So the only thing I'm finding that I have to really adjust as a thrower is that the tensile strength of this requires a little bit more handling than when I had 2 pieces of roving, which slightly twisted as I went into my stitch and was giving it a little bit more strength. So I think the gauge is adjusted because I am being very tender with this as I throw it, where I can really usually be like super tight knitter when I'm putting it onto the stitch. So that's the only thing about this. I'm not finding it super difficult to adjust or splice back together or etc. So I will say that the only thing I did adjust for working with this is my cast on, in that I usually do a German twisted cast on, which requires a lot of back and forth and tugging and pulling. And for this yoke, I did a knitted cast on, which I haven't done in years. The German twisted is a go-to for me. And so that was like the first cast on I learned to do, where you kind of twist it around your finger and put the needle up through and around. But that lent itself to more control and less tugging and pulling and less breakage for the cast on with this Plötulopi. So as you can see, I'm knitting it in the charcoal and the white, and I have finished the yoke and I am working on the short row shaping. I have high hopes that because this is a smaller size, it will be done quicker. Possible? Possible. So that's Cameron taken care of. He's very excited about it, slightly disappointed that he isn't getting his hand spun yet, but I did assure him that that was coming, but I wanted him to have a sweater, and so then he was on his way. So, lickety split, fiber lickety split Trek. Is that my new middle name, lickety split? Let's hope so. I'm sure Cameron will hope so. Now with Cameron kind of on this sweater, project, with a sweater project in mind, or a sweater project on the go for Cameron, Madison is of course keeping track and score of all of these elements. And a while ago, actually in October, I had brought my Nicole shawl, which Nicole Dupuis had knit for me and gifted to me. And this is a pattern on Ravelry, and I had wrapped it around her, and she said, "I love this, I want it." And I said, "I'm happy to knit one for you, and we just need to find the yarn." And I had really spent some time, and I know I discussed this in my last podcast, and some of you had mentioned using alternative fibers for spinning, so thank you for that. And I had, tossed around a number of ideas. Well, I go over on Thursday nights, and I have dinner with them, and play games, and put them to bed, and hang out with my brother's family. And I had brought this with me, and she tried it on, and she really, really liked it. So I looked at Manchalopi and Wool Dreamers, which is what I knit this Wildwood shawl out of by B. Mandarine, and they had a really beautiful magenta. And so I asked her to pick out some colors, and she picked the magenta for the main color, and then she picked a beautiful blue, light blue for the contrast. I was able to get all of these colors except for one from Tribe Yarns. I ordered they're releasing 3 new colors, I think, and I ordered a deep verdant green to go with my leftover of this for a yoke sweater, and I ordered the magenta, and I then ordered the light blue from Lauren Nelkin on Etsy because I wasn't able to procure it from the same shop overseas. So I think I have gone on before about this, but I really love this yarn. I love that it comes from a conservation breeds in Spain that have a real intended stewardship about them. They're very connected to the landscape. They have a variety of different yarns as well. Manchalopi is the only one I've worked with, and as I said, this comes off of the cheese in 2 pieces of roving versus 1, and so I would definitely recommend this. It's got a velvety feel to it, squishy, velvety, yeah, I think you could do a lot of different things for this, for a lot of different applications. I have been sleeping with this. I just love it so much, and I wear it quite often. I finished my sleeve in the J sweater. This is by Rachel Brockman for Universal Yarns. This is a free pattern on their website. I am knitting this in Home Guard in this Norsk Spelsau yarn in the natural brown and cream. And I did, let's see, 5 decreases for the yarn, for the arm, and I bound off in this Icelandic that is my own, that was spun at a rustic fiber mill, and I bound off in a seed stitch. So it's a little bit unconventional, as you can see. When it's on, I've been flipping this and just having kind of a big cuff. I have not blocked it yet, but honestly for me, what I like about it is when I go to put on some of my tunics, which are bracelet length sleeves, it's not bunching everything up, and I'm not kind of wiggling and adjusting, and I can get my arm up there. It doesn't really get in the way. I can pull it way up to my elbow, so I'm going to leave it. I had some reservations, and then those were quickly assuaged by my friend Nicole, who said it looked very elvish. And so once she mentioned any Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, I was happy to embrace that assessment. So here it is with the sleeve, and I am going around and round in brown. I've been saying that for like 6 months, haven't I, on the sleeve, and it's going. So I got a little distracted by my yoke cast on. I'm just really craved that color work, and I'm thinking more and more about it. I am in Kate Davies All Over Club, and she's released 2 beautiful, well, she's worth, a lot of the patterns are super beautiful, but the 2 that have caught my eye is a pullover and a cardigan in all over color work. I think it's the Skifty and the Cave. And if you've not checked out Kate Davies' latest work, I would recommend you go over to her blog and see what she's up to, and visit her shop and see her yarns. She really was an impetus for me expanding my skill sets and expanding my deepening and articulating my connection with wool and landscape. And I'm always eternally grateful for her work and pathfinding for me. Anyway, those are on my brain, and here I am, brown yarn and around. So that yoke really moved me and got me invigorated and excited. Let's see, I think that's going to be it. I talked about the Plotolopi, I talked about the J sweater, the Kairuna continues to be there. Like I said, I got distracted. Some of you have asked about, in fact, this Wildwood shawl by Melody Hoffman, and this I received as a beta from as being a patron, and you do receive her patterns if you are a patron and subscribe. I think she has plans to release this at some point, but you should check out her patron if you're interested in this particular pattern and her work. That being said, I think I'm going to bid you a fond farewell. As I said before, I so appreciate all of your comments and insight. The positive momentum that provides for me here is most appreciated and deeply felt. Many fond wishes, many blessings, and I will see you next time. Bye.